Welcome at my talk, which is where we are going to talk about testing Grails with Drew and Grew. My name is Vladimír Oraný. I work for a company called Agrapools. We make a tool with a similar name to manage social networks, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and the others. So here you can see the links to the two frameworks I'm going to talk today. And let's get started. So in case you are not familiar who's Grew and Drew, Grew is the baldy one, Drew is the one with the blonde hairs. And it's kind of accident because, I just seen the movie so many times with my daughter, so it just fits into like Grew is for Grails unit testing, and Drew stands for Data Reconstruction Utility. First you have to find a shortcut, and you can find the proper wording. Okay. So this is what we are going to talk about today. So I will show you some sample application to have some common ground to explain what's going on. And then there is the first goal of Drew. Drew is tool to help you manage your test data, and especially if you want to base it on some real life data. And then we move to Grew, which is now a general testing framework for HTTP endpoints. And I will going to show you how to use it with Grails. And first, just to show you how to get there, I will show you what are the current approach of testing in Grails, and then we move how to do it in Grew. Okay, so if you are into testing some kind of complex application, you often face an issue with having some data which are properly managed. How to get some test data. So it could be maybe production data, close to production data, some data from test server. And this is what we are going to find an answer for. So, does anyone not know Twitter here? Cool. So I think I find a good common ground, good data structures to explain. So our application is something like Twitter, but because everything in Groovy needs to start with GR, so our application is Gritter. Does anyone know what is a Gritter? So I still can't see you, so maybe you can shout if you know it. Gritter is this, actually. So, again, you find the name, and then you figure out it already exists. So, okay, so Gritter is this yellow car or orange car just throwing grit on the streets when there is a snow. So, and actually, in Scotland, they already went kind of social. So in Scotland, you can go to this website, and you can follow your Gritters around the whole Scotland. Okay, so this is the base of our sample application. So this is Gritter. It's actually a Grails free 2 application created from scratch using Angular profile. So it is like Angular client and REST backend. And REST backend is the thing you want to test. So it has pretty simple domain model. So we have some status, kind of tweet, with a created date, with a linked user, text, and it has some kind of engagements, like likes or retweets or whatever you want to call it. We have a very simple user with a username, and we have engagements, which is this kind of likes. But don't call your Grails domain class a like or anything which is a SQL reserved word. It won't end up well. So that's the reason we have engagements instead of like. So how do you prepare your test data? How you prepare your data just to run the application, to show it to your clients, to show it to your front-end developers so they can type in the Angular goodies. Okay, so for example, in Grails, there is a bootstrap Groovy class. And it's not shown here, but you have, for example, you have an array of users, and activities the creators can do. What else? Directions and places. Actually, there's like 20 Scottish towns in there in an array. And you just generate some random stuff. And you generate some random engagements in here. So this is where you generate the statuses. And then this is when you assign new engagements or likes. So, and once you have it, you can have some service in Grails, which will find, for example, the top statuses. This is really silly way how to do it, but it works. So you just fade everything which was created in the selected dates. You sort it without just returning the new list. So you don't sort it in line. And OK, so if it has more engagements, then just return it. But you want to have the one with the biggest lot of engagement first, so reverse the list and take whatever is the max. So it's not a good implementation, but it works, and you want to test it. So where to get the data? Well, you can generate them, but if you want to do it in a test, you want something stable. You don't want, always different data in your tests. So is there some kind of source where you can get your test data already? So, well, it's REST application. So this is probably backed by some JSON. And this JSON usually contains everything you need. So the JSON looks probably like this. OK, there's some ID, the creation date, the text. It's usually denormalized. So the user is not just the ID, but it already contains everything you need. The same for engagements, usually. It doesn't have to be, but it's very common so that you send like whole data in a single request. Maybe you're already using GraphQL on the backend, so you can have some advanced query. Cool. So maybe I can just grab this JSON and load it to my test. And this actually works. I was pretty surprised, but there's a Grails binding to domain classes. So basically, if you just parse it with a JSON slurper, you get an array of 25. For this situation, it was 25 statuses. This comes from the testing framework. All we are taking a look today comes from the testing.grails.org, with from the new testing framework, which is based on traits. And OK, so if you save it, it will actually load not just the statuses, but also the users, the engagements. But then if you want to try out to find out some of the statuses which was present in the JSON before, so you can see it was 117, it fails. The point is, Grails by default, or maybe I'm not sure if there's any way, you can't assign the ID, which could be a problem because the JSON you are loading maybe is not the denormalized as I've shown you. Maybe it just contains the statuses, and then there's another JSON containing the IDs, and you should be able to link it together. So there's user one in here, and you need to be aware of the original IDs from the source. Other example, which is actually the problem in our application, is that your data can span multiple persistence stores. So some of the data could be in the relational database, some of them could be in DynamoDB. And then you still need to keep the original IDs. And this is where Drew comes in the show. So this is how you declare your data in Drew. You just say, OK, from this statuses JSON, just whatever in the root, just map it to status. And you get the exactly same result. And you can still have a track on the original ID. It automatically figures out what domains needs to be imported. So you don't have to mock a status manual, you don't have to mock a user, you don't have to mock the engagements. It just simply works. The file is located in the convenient location, which is in test resources with the same path as the test, and in the directory with the same name of the specifications. It could be, for example, I don't know, status spec, and there is the JSON status, the JSON file, which looks exactly as the example I've shown you before. And you can still keep a track on the origin ID. And even if it's spun, for example, into DynamoDB in the GORM, or maybe just the POJO, it will still mix and match together everything. And it's a rule, so it just clears the mock database every time. Okay, another useful feature. So you have your data in JSON. Maybe you can just scroll back a bit. This is okay. And there could be, this could have a different name, or actually there's a engagement account, which is direct property. So what we can do to be sure that everything was imported, you can just expect that the report is empty. And for this situation, it will show you that, for example, engagement count wasn't mapped. So you know, okay, so is this something I'm losing now, or is it something which is already present in the data I've loaded? Okay, so in this time, it's something which is present already in the data. It's just derived property. So okay, so just say ignore it. And there is plenty of other things you can do with the mapping. You can set some defaults in case your data domain classes needs some default values which are not present in the JSON. You can override the names and other stuff, but it would take much longer to show you today. You can find in the doc. So once you have it, you can just simply add another method, which will basically use whatever is in the database loaded from Drew. And this is just a regular service unit test method. Finds top states, and it will return whatever you expect for the given data you loaded. So this is also other thing. You may need to create not just a single entity for testing, but you may need to load 25 like me here. Okay, so you get expected result, and you have always the same expected, let's say, entity loaded here. Okay, so this was single test. But what if you want to reuse the data in a different test? In that case, you can define something called prepare dataset. So you may have just a kind of library class holding all the prepare datasets. Let's say with statuses, and then in other tests, you can just load it by include the statuses. So you can have a single source of data for your tests, and reuse them across different other tests. Okay, so that's all from Drew. So the Drew is a way how to reuse the existing normalized data, which is usually JSON. It could be YAML. You can easily write your own parsers, and you can mix and match things like GORM entities, things like DynamoDB. You have support for DynamoDB mapper, so you can have DynamoDB mapper from Drew, which will do most of the basic queries for you. And as I said, it's easily extensible. Maybe in the future, if someone is interested, you can, I don't know, write a client for Yokel, for Hibernate, for JPA. Everything is possible. This is not limited to Grails. Okay, so let's move forward. So this is the other guy. This is Drew. This is Drew, which should state for Grails unit testing. So how do you test the HTTP 8 effectively? So so the point is to test exactly what you want to test. So what do you want to test if you test HTTP endpoints? You want to test that you just issue some HTTP request to your endpoint, and you get an expected result. That's my point of view. It all depends on how you declare your unit of the test. It doesn't have to be just a control. So if we take a look on the current state in the Grails, so basically what you have a unit test, you have integration test. Unit tests are great because they run in isolation, they are really fast, you can use mocks to any service you want, And there are traits for, I don't know, textual mappings, interceptors, controllers, views, whatever you want, I guess. Because Grails goes really deep in the testing, so you can, I think whatever is possible to write in Grails, you can test it. On the other hand, you have integration tests. So if you want to test some complex stuff, and I know there was a workshop yesterday, if anyone was attending it. It's a pity I missed it. But anyway, so integration are more complex texts. So there is the way you can test. Okay, send the request to this endpoint and get the result, and somehow assess if it's okay or it's not. So Groovy is trying to do both. So like being kind of complex test, and it uses some DSL on top of it. So let's say in our application, in our gritter, we have very simple index method you want to test, which just set some defaults for the parameters, like if max is not present, it's 25, offset is always 0. Defaults are by created, and just really, really simple return the statuses. So if we go to the unit test way, we need to test everything in a separate steps. So, okay. So this is, if you may be familiar with control unit test, as I'm just returning a model, so I can just set up some parameters like maximum, offset over here. I can call the control method. This comes from control unit test mixin, not mixin, a tray. And okay, I get the model get the statuses, and the size is 10. Okay, sounds good. Max 10, returns 10. You grab the first one, and actually this is where Drew also comes into the action. So the data loaded by Drew before from the test JSON. Okay, and you say, okay, it has a user, it has some expected username, it has some expected test. That's the round one. So now you know you have a controller, and it does what you want to do. The other step, you have, I've created it using the Angular profile, which comes by default with JasonViews. So JasonViews are something really useful, similar to GSP, Groovy server pages. And it allows you to, in a file called, I think it's a JSON file extension, so you can render like our status. It also compiled static, so render status. And I want to have this kind of the normalized form we were talking before. So just render the user inside, so it's not just ID, it's also the username. This is the derived engagement count we've seen before in the JSON. And these are the engagements, so it will render each engagement and the user within. So you have like all the data you want to show in the front end. So luckily, you can test this as well, which is great. So you have this JSON view unit test you can implement. So you can send it some statuses. You can see now it's much simpler. I would be better if I can render more, but just a simple statuses list with a single status. You render the template, which is located in the status/index because it's status controller and index method. You send your model, and now I've seen so many times tests like this, whenever it was like the old test framework or the new one, like this JSON unit test, many people just grab the JSON and now start to assert the object. So okay, I have the list is returned, it has its size. Okay, there is a user in the first item there is a user, it has a username, Vlad. And there is a text, and it has the engagements, which is a list, and but engagement count is 0 because there were no engagements, because I didn't want to bother with setting up too much data in actually this one. Okay, so I was doing a lot of XML before, and it wasn't fun, but it was there was quite a good tool called XML unit. And XML unit just compares two XML files with some flags, so you don't have to worry about the white spaces and other stuff. So I was just wondering, okay, is there something similar for JSON? And actually there is. There's a toolkit, there's a framework called JSON unit, which does exactly what I want. So instead of just doing, like plenty of lines comparing the parsed object, you can just compare the JSON itself. And for example, you can ignore some stuff. There is a lot of these placeholders you can use. So for example, created could be every time the recent date, basically the now. So you can ignore it and say, okay, the text should be hi all, used as a username Vlad. I think this gives you a much better picture of what are you going to test, what is the expected result. So this was the view. This was the JSON rendered. And it's not all. We are not over. So if you want to be sure that if you hit the endpoint with your request, you should also be aware that it's properly mapped. So you should implement this, URL mappings, unit tests with URL mappings. So if I go to /statuses, it will actually really call the controller status and the method index. Because you may have some different mapping. You, for example, can prepend /API/ the controller name at the beginning. And it's messed up. So okay, we have the default mapping, which works exactly as we want. So it's /status goes to index. Okay, so what we are trying to achieve now. What was the point? Well, the point was, so if I go to browser and hit the URL, I get the expected result. And I get a bit lost because I have to test the controller, I have to test the view, I have to test the URL mappings alone. I have to test it separately. And I wasn't happy with this. So is there a better way to do it? Okay. So this is the way how you can do it with Groove. And if you were in the workshop yesterday, I've seen the slide, so you can use, it was using Grails or REST builder. And this is very similar to it if you take a look. So this just gives me some data using Drew, as we shown before. And this is how you start with Groove. It's also rules, so it do some cleanup and verification after each test and before the test. Okay, it have this kind of minions and depspicable commands, so equip and steal this. Just tell Grails to steal this test for itself, and equip the Grails client and prepare it, including the URL mapping. So in every test, you now can see which mappings are you using and if it's really mapped. Okay, this is some cleanup. This is where the data get loaded, and here we go. So you just follow the thing you really want to test. So okay, Groove just test for me. If I get the status with a given parameters with max 10, offset 5, I expect this JSON to be returned. And the JSON is a fixture file. And where is it? Actually, it doesn't have to be anywhere. So Groove is kind of pessimistic but optimistic in this. So first time you run this test, you get this result. It will fail. It will fail because the file doesn't exist if you haven't created it before, but it will create it in the convenient location, which is again like Drew, like it could be like gritter / status controller spec / status is the JSON or something like that. I don't. Okay. So first time you call it, it will fail if the file is not present, but it will create it for you. Then you can go to some REST client. It could be Postman. It could be IntelliJ. You grab the JSON. Oh, actually, sorry, no, I missed this. So actually, it will create the first file with the content which has been rendered from the controller itself. Okay, something more complex. Oh, not that much. But for example, we can have the save action here, and we want to test the save action here. So, okay, we use some Grails binding here. So the status is bind by Grails. Then we somehow get the current user, who is logged in, or somehow. Okay, if the user is not logged in, just render unauthorized. Otherwise, just assign the user, validate. If it's not valid, respond with the errors. Otherwise, save it and render the saved file. This is pretty easy. It looks pretty easy. But there are some shortcomings. For example, where does the user get into here? Well, actually, it's injected in the interceptor. So this is pretty simple logic, but it could be, like 200 lines of logic in the interceptor. And I really want to follow the things to be as close as the integration test, but still have the speed of the unit test, so still be in the unit test area. So I can mock services easily, I can set up the data I want easily, without have to, every time clean up the database. So this is really stupid. You just have the user in the header. Okay, don't do this, but it's a demo. But actually, it's not that difficult to do this with Groovy, because as you can include the URL mappings here, you can also include the interceptor. So now it will call not just the controller, but it will also call the interceptor in the proper phases. And again, this is the very similar. So just if I post now it's a post to statuses, I need to set the header so it matches the user from the database stored by Drew, and some JSON file. I expect the status and other JSON file. This is the content of the new status request, so it's very simple, just holds the text. That's enough. So I just post the text of the status there, and I will see what's happening. And this is the fixture file, the reference one. And you can see also Groovy gives some other goodies, because, for example, many times you work with IsoDate. So this is going to match an IsoDate, but an IsoDate which was generated recent, which points to recent time. So usually just a couple of milliseconds before. I think the limit is actually 1 hour, just to be sure. But you can be just regular IsoDate. Positive integer string, because many times you can just render ID, but it could be a string, it could be a number, whatever. And you have the input, you have the output expected. You don't do any matching in the code. And we can also, if you are not happy just running this in the unit phase, you can very easily go to the integration phase. Because Groovy also supports just a plain HTTP client. So you just run this integration, rollback, and you get the server port injected. This is the way how we can get the server port injected in your integration test. This time you equip the HTTP client instead of Grails. And you just declare the server URL as a base URI. And this is actually the same. So you can use the same notation, the same description of your test, same fixture files, but only thing you just use different client. There are some goodies, I will show it later on. So just a recapitulation. So Groovy gives you a way how to test HTTP endpoints, and it goes with the specification by example. So what you have plenty of JSON files, which can get generated automatically. You can change them. So later on if you need. It has a sensible defaults. For example, if you can remember, it was testing by default status 200. If it was different, it would fail. It has a built-in support for JSON unit, so your fixtures can contain the JSON unit placeholders. So you don't have to care about IDs being different all the time, timestamps being different all the time, but you still see how the structure of JSON looks like, the one you expect. It currently supports HTTP, as you've seen in the integration test. It supports the Grails controllers, and it also supports Spring MVC, so you can write tests for Spring Boot application. And soon, we're currently incubating in our company support for an AWS API proxy. So if you are writing Lambdas, which handles the API proxy by Amazon, you can use Groovy as well very soon. And it's easy extensible, so you can write your own client again. So what does the Groovy for HTTP do? It does the status assertion, so you can say, okay, status should be OK, which is the default. You don't have to write it. You can say status created, status not authorized. The formats in and out, so you can. It's not limited to JSON. There's a support for HTML using XML unit, so it will tidy up the HTML and compare two HTML files, one to another. Of course, you can supply the query parameters, headers, and you can assert the redirection. So if the endpoint redirects to location you want. For Grails, there are some other stuff. So it's the same as HTTP, but you can use the URL mappings. You can include the interceptors. So if you heavily rely on logic in interceptors, it's good to, from my point of view, it's good to, instead of basically copying the logic from the interceptor, you can just include the interceptor and it will work. You can assert models. It wasn't shown here, but you can assert the status model in there, and you can assert something which is forwarding, which is specific to Grails. And it does have the support for JasonViews. So if you're using, even if you're using the old JSON converters, it will work, or you can use the new JasonViews as well. And I'm afraid that's all. I've been ahead of time, so we have plenty of time for questions. Sorry, I can't see you, so if just shout on me. Sure.
You support interceptors.
Yes.
How about the Spring security stuff? How do you handle that?
In our company, we're not using the Spring plugin, Spring security plugin, but I believe it's also based on the Interceptor, is it? No, it's not? Which one?
Sometimes the HTTP version is on filters.
In filters. Okay, so, well, this is, if I'm aware, the filters are not present in Grails 3, are they?
Depending on what you use.
Okay. So no, I'm not sure how to do it at the moment, because we just use. But I think we migrated everything from filters to interceptors because there was not a good support for it in the Grails 3. Maybe. I hoped that in Grails 3 there are just interceptors, not filters. But I think.
No, I don't think so. At least the Spring security.
Okay. Could be.
You could use the HTTP client, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can use the integration test for this.
Oh, yeah.
If something's beyond. So any other question? Sure.
Drew has some kind of views outside of Grails.
Sure, it's not Drew? Yeah. Drew is not limited to Grails. For example, in the other session, I'm just parsing the actual Twitter JSON feed into POJOs. So I have the POJOs, and I just can parse them into, like the regular Twitter feed, the JSON response. I can parse it into POJO. And as I said, it's very easy extensible. So yeah, if you want, I don't know, Hibernate implementation or something really weird, I would really like to see, for example, Yockel, or how it's called, Jog. So you can test even map to SQL directly, but I'm not that far. Okay, anyone? Anyone want to, for example, I just wonder if anyone would like to see different implementation that has been mentioned here. Because I was thinking about the Vertex, but we are using for Vertex application, we are using just the HTTP. So you have this mock deployment you can do. And I think for Redpack, there is another way how to do anything else than just also integrations, kind of integration spec. Okay, so if there is no any question, just thank you, and free to go for a coffee.